The telegram arrived 3 days after Samuel Pierce was already buried in the hard California soil, and Sophia Pierce held the thin paper in her trembling hands as the stagecoach rattled toward Truckee, wondering how a marriage of convenience to a man she had never met could end before it even began. She had left Boston with nothing but 2 trunks, a worn Bible, and the promise of land out west, a widow before she had ever been a wife. And now the summer dust of 1876 coated everything she owned as the Sierra Nevada mountains rose like ancient sentinels around her. The driver called out that they were approaching town, and Sophia pressed her face to the window, searching for something that might resemble the prosperity Samuel had described in his letters. Instead, she saw a rough collection of wooden buildings scattered along a rutted main street, the remnants of the railroad boom that had passed through years earlier. Men in dusty clothes moved between the saloons and supply stores, and she clutched her black morning dress tighter, feeling every eye turn toward the coach as it rolled to a stop. "Truckee, madam," the driver announced, climbing down to help her with her luggage. "You got someone meeting you." "I am here to claim property," Sophia said, her voice steadier than she felt. "The Pierce homestead." The driver's weathered face showed surprise, then something like pity. "That would be the old place out past the Watson spread. You are Samuel's widow, then?" "I am Mrs. Pierce, yes." She did not elaborate on the arrangement, on how Samuel had advertised for a wife in the Boston papers, how she had been desperate enough to answer, how they had corresponded for 6 months before she boarded the train west, how she had imagined building a life with a stranger, only to find he had died of a fever 2 weeks before her arrival. A tall man in worn denims and a dusty hat approached, his boots kicking up small clouds with each step. He had the sun-darkened skin of someone who spent his days outdoors, and his eyes were the color of the summer sky above them, sharp and assessing. "You must be Mrs. Pierce. I am Owen Watson. My land runs adjacent to your late husband's property." Sophia accepted his offered hand, feeling the calluses and strength in his grip. He was perhaps 30 years old, maybe a few years more, with lines around his eyes that spoke of squinting into bright days and hard work. "Mr. Watson, I appreciate you coming to meet me. Your husband and I were neighbors, though I cannot say we were close." Owen released her hand and gestured to a wagon nearby. "I brought my rig to take you out to the property. The road is rough for a stagecoach, and your trunks will fit better in the bed." She watched as he and the driver loaded her belongings, noting the easy strength in Owen's movements, the quiet efficiency. When he helped her onto the wagon seat, his hands were gentle despite their roughness, and she found herself grateful for this stranger's kindness in a place where she knew no one. The road out of town was indeed rough, cutting through stands of pine and fir that filled the air with their sharp, clean scent. Owen handled the horses with practiced ease, and for a while they rode in silence, the only sounds the creak of the wagon and the jingle of the harness. "I am sorry for your loss," Owen finally said, his voice low and sincere. "Thank you." Sophia kept her eyes on the road ahead. "Though I confess it is strange to mourn a man I never met." Owen glanced at her, and she saw understanding rather than judgment in his expression. Samuel mentioned he had sent for a bride. He was excited about it, talked about finally having someone to share the place with. What was he like? The question escaped before she could stop it, this need to know something about the man whose name she now carried. Hardworking. Kept to himself mostly. He had been trying to make the land produce for 3 years, but it is tough country up here. The growing season is short and the winters are brutal. Owen paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "He was not a bad man, Mrs. Pierce. Just a lonely one, I think." They crested a rise and Owen pointed ahead. "There is your property." Sophia's heart sank. The cabin was small and weathered, its roof sagging slightly on one side. The barn was in better shape, but the fences were in disrepair, and the fields looked neglected, overtaken by weeds and wild grasses. A few scraggly chickens scratched in the dirt near the house, and that was the only sign of life. "It needs work," Owen said quietly. "Samuel was not well for the last few months. The fever took him slowly." Sophia straightened her spine, drawing on reserves of strength she had not known she possessed. She had come too far to turn back now, had burned every bridge in Boston to get here. "Then I shall have to get to work." Owen pulled the wagon to a stop in front of the cabin and climbed down, then helped her descend. Up close, the property looked even more daunting. The windows were grimy, the door hung slightly crooked, and she could see daylight through gaps in the walls. "Mrs. Pierce," Owen began, his tone careful, "I do not mean to overstep, but this is not a place for a woman alone. The work required here is more than most men could handle, and winter comes early in these mountains. You might consider selling the land and returning east." "To what?" The words came out sharper than she intended, and she took a breath to soften her tone. "I have nothing back east, Mr. Watson. No family, no prospects. Whatever this place needs, I shall find a way to provide it." He studied her for a long moment, and she met his gaze steadily, willing him to see that she meant every word. Finally, he nodded. "Then let me help you get settled today. Tomorrow you can decide what needs doing first." They carried her trunks inside, and Sophia tried not to let her dismay show at the state of the interior. Dust covered everything, and the air was stale and close. The furniture was rough but functional. A table and chairs, a narrow bed frame with a thin mattress, a cast iron stove that looked like it had seen better days. Dishes were stacked on a shelf, and a few of Samuel's belongings still hung on pegs by the door. Owen opened the windows to let in fresh air, then inspected the stove. "Chimney looks clear enough. I will bring you some firewood before I go. You will need it tonight. The temperature drops once the sun goes down." "You have already done so much," Sophia protested, but Owen was already heading outside. She used the time alone to explore her new home more thoroughly. The cabin consisted of one main room with the kitchen area at one end and the sleeping area at the other. A small root cellar was accessible through a trapdoor in the floor, and she found it reasonably well stocked with preserves and potatoes. There was a water pump outside, which was a relief, and the barn held a milk cow that looked at her with sad, patient eyes. "Poor thing," Sophia murmured, noting that the cow's udder was full. "No one has been caring for you properly, have they?" She had grown up in the city and knew nothing about farming or ranching, but she had learned to be resourceful over the years. Finding a bucket, she set about figuring out how to milk the cow, her hands clumsy at first but gradually finding the rhythm. The cow bore her inexperience with stoic patience. Owen returned with an armload of split wood and found her in the barn, sleeves rolled up and face flushed with effort. Something flickered in his expression, gone too quickly for her to identify, and he set the wood down carefully. "You got her to cooperate," he observed, a hint of approval in his voice. "We reached an understanding." Sophia stood, wiping her hands on her already dusty skirt. "I am sure I did it all wrong, but at least she seems more comfortable. The chickens will need feeding too, and the cow will need fresh water and hay. There is a vegetable patch behind the cabin that might be salvageable if you can pull the weeds." Owen rattled off the information matter-of-factly, and Sophia felt a wave of exhaustion just thinking about all the work ahead, but she lifted her chin and nodded. "I shall manage." Owen looked like he wanted to say something more, but instead he just tipped his hat. "My place is about 2 miles northwest, following the creek. If you need anything, you can find me there. I have hired hands who can help with the heavier work if you need it." "I could not afford to pay anyone," Sophia admitted, hating how vulnerable the confession made her feel. "We can work something out. Neighbors help each other up here, Mrs. Pierce. It is how we all survive." He headed for his wagon, then paused. "I will come by in a few days to check on you if that is acceptable. That would be kind of you, Mr. Watson." She watched him drive away, the wagon disappearing down the rough track, and then she was truly alone for the first time since leaving Boston. The silence of the mountains pressed in around her, broken only by the whisper of wind through the pines and the distant call of a bird she could not identify. Sophia turned back to the cabin, rolled her sleeves higher, and got to work. The next few days passed in a blur of exhausting labor. She scrubbed the cabin from top to bottom, beating dust from the mattress and washing the windows until they sparkled. She learned to coax heat from the temperamental stove and burned her first 3 attempts at biscuits before producing something edible. The chickens scattered whenever she approached, making gathering eggs an adventure, and the cow continued to regard her with patient skepticism. The vegetable patch was a tangle of weeds, but underneath, she found struggling potato plants, carrots, and onions. She spent hours on her hands and knees, pulling weeds until her back ached and her hands were raw and blistered. At night, she fell into bed too exhausted even to cry, though sometimes she lay awake listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the wilderness and wondering what she had gotten herself into. On the 4th day, Owen returned with a wagon load of supplies. Sophia was behind the cabin, wrestling with a stubborn fence post that had come loose, her hair escaping its pins and dirt smudging her cheek. She did not hear him approach until he spoke. "That post needs to be reset properly, or it will just come loose again." She spun around, heart pounding, and found him watching her with those steady blue eyes. He wore work clothes and had tools in the wagon bed, and she realized he had come prepared to help. "Mr. Watson, I cannot accept charity," she began, but he held up a hand. "It is not charity. I need help with my hay harvest in a few weeks, and I figure you can repay me by cooking for my crew during the work." "You can cook, can you not?" "I am learning," Sophia said honestly. "But yes, I can manage meals for working men. Then we have a trade." Owen unloaded tools from his wagon with the same efficient economy of movement she had noticed before. "Now, show me what needs the most urgent attention." They spent the day working side by side. Owen reset fence posts while Sophia held them steady, and he showed her how to properly repair the gaps in the barn walls. He was patient with her questions, never making her feel foolish for not knowing things that were second nature to him. They worked mostly in comfortable silence, the kind that did not need filling with empty words. At midday, Sophia brought out bread and cheese and cool water from the pump, and they sat in the shade of the cabin to eat. Owen removed his hat, revealing hair the color of sun-dried hay, and wiped sweat from his brow. "You are doing better than I expected," he said between bites. "Most city women would have given up by now. I am more stubborn than most city women." Sophia took a long drink of water, savoring its coldness. "And I truly have nowhere else to go." "What about family back east?" She shook her head. "I was raised in an orphanage. I worked as a seamstress until the factory closed, and then I could not find other employment. When I saw Samuel's advertisement, it seemed like providence, a chance for a new life, a home of my own." Owen was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "It takes courage to travel halfway across the country to marry a stranger, or desperation." She tried to keep her tone light, but the words carried the weight of truth. One does not exclude the other. Owen stood, brushing crumbs from his pants, Come on, there is still plenty of daylight left. Let me show you how to properly maintain that barn roof before the rain comes." As the afternoon wore on, Sophia found herself stealing glances at her neighbor when he was not looking. There was something solid and dependable about Owen Watson, something that made her feel safe despite barely knowing him. He moved with quiet confidence, the kind that came from knowing exactly who he was and what he was capable of. And when he smiled, which was rare but genuine, it transformed his serious face into something almost boyish. They worked until the sun began to sink toward the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Owen loaded his tools back into the wagon, and Sophia walked with him, suddenly reluctant to see him go. "Thank you for your help today," she said. "I know you have your own work to attend to. My crew can handle things for a day." He climbed onto the wagon seat, then looked down at her. "Mrs. Pierce, I want you to know that if you run into any trouble at all, you come find me. There are some rough characters in these parts, and a woman alone is vulnerable." "I have a rifle," Sophia said, though in truth she had no idea how to use it. Owen's expression suggested he knew exactly how much experience she had with firearms. "Do you know how to shoot it?" "I am sure I can figure it out if needed." He sighed, shaking his head slightly. "Tomorrow I will come by and give you a shooting lesson. You should at least know how to defend yourself properly." Before she could argue, he clicked to the horses and the wagon rolled forward. Sophia watched him go, feeling that same odd reluctance as before, as if his leaving somehow made the wilderness seem larger and lonelier. That night, as she lay in bed listening to the wind in the trees, Sophia thought about Owen Watson. He had been nothing but kind and respectful, helping her without making her feel weak or incapable. There was no pity in his manner, only a practical acknowledgement of what needed doing and a willingness to teach her. She appreciated that more than she could say. But she also found herself noticing things that had nothing to do with gratitude. The way his hands looked when he worked, strong and capable. The rare smile that lit his eyes before it reached his mouth. The breadth of his shoulders and the easy strength in his movements. The low, measured way he spoke, never wasting words but always meaning what he said. She shook her head against the pillow, reminding herself that she had just arrived, that she was supposed to be in mourning, that she had far too much work ahead to be entertaining such thoughts. But in the darkness, she could not help wondering what it would be like to have someone like Owen Watson as more than just a helpful neighbor. The next morning dawned clear and bright, and Sophia was feeding the chickens when Owen arrived, this time on horseback and carrying what looked like several rifles. She wiped her hands on her apron and went to meet him. "Good morning, Mr. Watson." "Morning, Mrs. Pierce." He dismounted with fluid grace. "I brought a few different firearms so you can learn to handle various types. Never know what you might have access to in a pinch." They spent the next hour setting up targets made from old tin cans and pieces of wood. Owen showed her how to properly hold a rifle, how to sight down the barrel, how to squeeze the trigger rather than pull it. He stood close behind her, his hands guiding hers, and Sophia found herself acutely aware of his nearness, the warmth of his body, the smell of soap and leather and sun-warmed cotton. "Breathe out slowly, then fire," he instructed, his voice quiet near her ear. She followed his direction and the rifle kicked against her shoulder with surprising force. The tin can she had been aiming at remained stubbornly upright, but at least she had managed not to drop the gun. "Good," Owen said encouragingly. "Try again. Remember to hold it firm against your shoulder so the recoil does not hurt as much." They practiced until her shoulder ached and her ears rang, but by the end of the session, she had managed to hit several targets. Owen seemed satisfied with her progress, though he made her promise to practice regularly. "A gun is only useful if you can actually use it when needed," he said seriously. "And do not hesitate if you are truly threatened. There are men who would take advantage of a woman alone, and being polite or hesitant could cost you dearly." His concern touched her, even as the reality of her situation settled more heavily on her shoulders. She was a woman alone in rough country, and while the law existed in theory, it was distant and often ineffective. Her safety depended largely on herself and whatever kindness neighbors like Owen might extend. "I understand," she said quietly, "and I will practice, I promise." Owen nodded, then surprised her by reaching into his saddlebag and producing a bundle wrapped in cloth. "My housekeeper sent this. She thought you might appreciate some fresh bread and butter, and there is ham from our smokehouse." Sophia took the bundle, feeling unexpected emotion tighten her throat. Such a simple kindness, but it meant the world to her in that moment. "Please thank her for me. That is incredibly thoughtful. Her name is Margaret, and she has been trying to civilize me and my ranch hands for years with limited success." A hint of humor warmed his voice. She was glad to hear another woman had moved into the area, even under sad circumstances. "I should like to meet her sometime." "She would like that too. Maybe once you are more settled, you can come by for supper." Owen gathered the reins of his horse. "I need to get back, but I will check on you again in a few days. You have already done so much, Mr. Watson. I do not want to be a burden on your time." He looked at her steadily, his blue eyes serious. "You are not a burden, Mrs. Pierce. You are a neighbor, and more than that, you are someone trying hard to make a go of things against difficult odds. I respect that, and I am glad to help however I can." The simple sincerity of his words stayed with Sophia long after he had ridden away. She went back to her endless tasks with renewed energy, the bread and ham from Margaret a welcome change from her own uncertain cooking. That evening, as she sat on the cabin's small porch watching the sun set over the mountains, she felt something she had not expected to feel in this wild, strange place: hope. The days began to settle into a rhythm. Sophia rose with the sun, tended the animals, worked on improving the property, and fell into bed exhausted each night. She practiced with the rifle until she could reliably hit her targets, and she slowly learned to coax better results from the vegetable garden. The chickens began to tolerate her presence, and the cow started to seem almost friendly. Owen stopped by every few days, always with some practical reason: a tool she might need, advice on preparing for winter, information about the local area. But Sophia began to notice that his visits often lasted longer than strictly necessary, that he would linger over a cup of coffee, that their conversations ranged beyond just practical matters. She learned that he had come to California 5 years earlier from Colorado, buying his ranch with money saved from years of working cattle drives. He ran a small but successful operation, breeding horses and running beef cattle, employing 3 full-time ranch hands and seasonal help as needed. He was 28, had never been married, and from what she could gather, was well respected in the community. In turn, she told him about her life in Boston, the orphanage where she had been raised, the factory work that had been hard but at least provided independence. She told him about the months of correspondence with Samuel, the hope she had felt planning this new life, and the shock of arriving to find it all gone before it began. "You regret coming?" Owen asked one afternoon as they worked together to clear brush from around the cabin. It was late July now, and the heat of the day pressed down like a weight. Sophia paused, leaning on her rake to consider the question seriously. "No," she said finally. "Even with all the hardship, even arriving to find Samuel dead and this place in disrepair, I do not regret it. I would rather be here fighting to build something than back in Boston with nothing to fight for." Owen nodded slowly, a look of understanding passing between them. I felt the same when I left Colorado. Sometimes starting over is the only way forward. They went back to work, but Sophia felt something shift between them, some deeper recognition. They were both people who had left everything behind to chase a different life, both willing to work themselves to exhaustion for a chance at something better. That common ground felt significant in ways she was only beginning to understand. As August approached, Owen reminded her of their bargain. His hay would be ready to cut soon, and he would need her to cook for the crew during the harvest. It would be hard work, he warned, with up to 8 men needing 3 substantial meals a day for perhaps a week. "I am not worried," Sophia assured him, though privately she was terrified. Cooking for one was challenge enough. Cooking for 8 hungry ranch hands seemed impossible. Margaret saved her. Owen's housekeeper arrived at Sophia's cabin 2 days before the harvest was set to begin. A woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair and a no-nonsense manner that immediately put Sophia at ease. "Owen tells me you are a city girl learning country ways," Margaret said, unpacking supplies from her wagon. "Nothing wrong with that, but you will need help feeding that crew. Men working a hay harvest eat like starving bears, and they expect the food to be good." Together, they planned menus and prepared as much as possible in advance. Margaret taught her tricks for cooking in quantity, how to manage a kitchen efficiently, how to keep food hot and ready. She was patient and practical, and by the time she left, Sophia felt almost confident she could handle the task. The hay harvest began on a Wednesday morning, and Sophia arrived at Owen's ranch before dawn with supplies loaded in a borrowed wagon. The ranch was larger and more prosperous than she had imagined, with a solid 2-story house, a large barn, several outbuildings and corrals holding beautiful horses. Owen met her as she pulled up, helping to unload her supplies into the kitchen. In the growing light, she could see the anticipation in his expression, that edge of energy that came before demanding physical labor. "The crew is already in the fields," he told her. "We will be in for breakfast around 7, dinner at noon, and supper at 6. Margaret left you a list of supplies and where everything is kept." "I will be ready," Sophia promised, and he smiled at her, a full, genuine smile that made her pulse quicken. "I know you will." Then he was gone, and Sophia threw herself into the work. She cooked bacon and eggs, biscuits and potatoes, and had everything ready when the men came tramping in, loud and hungry. They were polite to her, careful with their language and manners, but they ate with single-minded intensity, clearing the table of food with impressive speed. Owen introduced her simply as Mrs. Pierce, their neighbor, and the men accepted her presence without question. She noticed how they deferred to Owen, how he commanded respect without seeming to demand it. He was clearly a good boss, firm but fair, and his men were loyal because of it. The days fell into an exhausting pattern. Sophia cooked from before dawn until after dark, producing massive quantities of food. Her feet ached, her back hurt, and she fell into the guest bed Margaret had prepared for her each night, too tired to even remove her shoes. But there was satisfaction in the work too, in seeing the men enjoy her cooking, in being part of this collective effort. Owen made a point of thanking her after each meal, his praise genuine and specific. He noticed when she tried new recipes, when she managed to have everything ready despite the unpredictable timing of the work. His attention felt like a warm weight, something precious and valued. On the 4th evening, the work finished earlier than expected, and Owen found Sophia on the porch, catching her breath in the cooling air. He handed her a glass of cold lemonade and sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "You have been incredible this week," he said quietly. The men have not stopped talking about how good the food has been. I had good preparation from Margaret. Sophia sipped the tart lemonade gratefully. But thank you. It has been challenging but rewarding. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the last of the sunset paint the sky. The mountains were dark silhouettes against the fading light, and somewhere in the distance a coyote called. Sophia felt exhausted but content, more at peace than she could remember being in years. "Sophia," Owen said, and she realized it was the first time he had used her given name. "I want to tell you something, but I do not want to presume or make you uncomfortable." Her heart began to beat faster, sensing something significant approaching. "You can speak freely with me, Owen." He turned to look at her, his expression serious in the gathering dusk. "These past weeks, getting to know you, working alongside you, seeing how strong and determined you are, I have come to care for you. More than a neighbor should, more than is probably appropriate given the circumstances." Sophia felt her breath catch, hope and fear warring inside her. "Owen, let me finish," he said gently. "I know you came here to marry Samuel, and I know you are supposed to be in mourning. I know it has only been weeks since you arrived and that everything is new and overwhelming. But I also know that life is uncertain and short, and that when you find something real, something that matters, you should not let it slip away out of propriety or fear." He reached out and took her hand, his calloused fingers warm and strong around hers. "I am not asking you to make any decisions right now. I am just telling you that I care for you, and that if you ever feel the same way, I would count myself the luckiest man in California." Sophia looked down at their joined hands, feeling tears prick her eyes. "I do feel the same way," she whispered. "I have tried to tell myself it is too soon, that I should wait, but Owen, every time you come by my place, every time you smile at me or work beside me or show me patience and kindness, I fall a little more." Owen's hand tightened on hers. "Then we will take this slow as you need. There is no rush, no pressure. We will just see where this takes us." She looked up at him then, seeing the honesty in his eyes, the genuine care. "I would like that very much." He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently, a gesture so tender it made her heart ache. "Then that is what we will do." They sat together until the stars came out, talking quietly about everything and nothing, hands still joined, something precious and new growing between them in the mountain darkness. The harvest finished the next day, and Owen paid Sophia generously for her work, more than she felt was fair, but he refused to negotiate. With the money, she was able to buy supplies to see her through the winter, and Owen helped her haul them back to her cabin in his wagon. August melted into September, and the air began to carry the first hints of autumn chill. The aspen trees started to turn gold, and the light took on a slanting quality that spoke of summer's end. Sophia continued to work on improving her property, and Owen continued to help her. But now their time together had a different quality, something warmer and more intimate. He began to court her properly, bringing her small gifts, wildflowers, or a book he thought she might enjoy. He invited her to Sunday suppers at his ranch, where Margaret fussed over her, and the ranch hands treated her with courtly politeness. He taught her to ride, patient with her nervousness, encouraging when she succeeded, and those rides through the mountain meadows became the highlight of her week. They talked endlessly, learning each other's thoughts and dreams. Owen spoke of his plans for the ranch, his desire to build something lasting. Sophia shared her love of reading, the education she had cobbled together from borrowed books and stolen moments. They discussed everything from politics to poetry, finding common ground and enjoying their differences. And slowly, carefully, they explored the physical side of their attraction. A held hand became an arm around her waist. A kiss on the knuckles became a kiss on the cheek. And then, one evening as Owen was leaving her cabin, Sophia reached up and kissed him properly on the mouth. He stilled for a heartbeat, then gathered her close, kissing her back with a tenderness that made her knees weak. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Sophia Pierce," he said, the words rough with emotion. "I think I have loved you since I watched you trying to milk that cow your first day here, so determined and brave." "I love you too," she whispered back. "I did not think I could feel this way, did not think I deserved to, but Owen, you make me so happy." They stood wrapped in each other's arms on her porch as the September twilight deepened around them, and Sophia felt like she had finally, truly come home. In early October, Owen asked her to marry him. They were riding through the high meadows, the aspens a blaze of gold around them, when he reined in his horse and dismounted, helping her down from her own mount. "Sophia, I know it has not been long and I know people will talk, but I do not want to waste another day without you as my wife." He pulled a ring from his pocket, simple gold that caught the afternoon sun. "Will you marry me?" "Yes," she said without hesitation, joy flooding through her. "Yes, Owen, absolutely yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger and kissed her thoroughly, and when they finally pulled apart they were both laughing, giddy with happiness. They rode back to his ranch still laughing, and Margaret took one look at their faces and started crying happy tears. They were married 3 weeks later in Truckee's small church, with Margaret and the ranch hands as witnesses. Sophia wore a simple dress of pale blue, and Owen wore his best suit, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Owen kissed her in front of everyone with such joy that the whole congregation burst into applause. The celebration afterward was held at Owen's ranch, which Sophia now thought of as their ranch, with food and music and dancing that lasted well into the evening. The whole community turned out, accepting Sophia as one of their own, and she felt overwhelmed by the warmth and welcome. That night, Owen carried her over the threshold of the ranch house, and they consummated their marriage with tenderness and passion. Sophia had been nervous, knowing so little about physical intimacy, but Owen was patient and gentle, making sure she felt safe and cherished. And when she finally fell asleep in his arms, she felt complete in a way she had never imagined possible. They decided she would move into the ranch house but keep her cabin and land. Owen helped her improve the property further, fixing the roof properly and reinforcing the barn, and they planted winter wheat that would be ready in the spring. The cabin would serve as storage or potentially housing for a future ranch hand, and the land would expand their overall operation. The first winter was hard but wonderful. Snow came early and deep to the mountains, and there were days when they were snowed in completely, unable to go farther than the barn. But the ranch house was warm and solid, and Sophia learned to love those quiet days with Owen, sitting by the fire while storms raged outside, reading or talking or simply being together. She learned to be a true rancher's wife, helping with the horses, keeping the books for the ranch, cooking for the hands, and managing the household. It was demanding work, but she loved it, loved feeling useful and capable, loved being part of something larger than herself. Owen was everything she could have hoped for in a husband. He was patient with her continued learning, passionate in his love for her, and endlessly supportive of her own interests and goals. When she expressed interest in starting a small school for local children, he helped her convert one of the outbuildings and encouraged her to pursue it. In late winter, Sophia realized she was pregnant. She told Owen one snowy February evening, nervous about his reaction, and he responded by sweeping her into his arms and spinning her around, laughing with pure delight. "A baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. We are going to have a baby." They spent the rest of the evening making plans, talking about names and nursery arrangements, and Sophia felt her heart so full she thought it might burst. This life she had stumbled into, this love she had found with Owen, it was more than she had ever dreamed possible. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the spring and summer. Owen was protective without being overbearing, making sure she did not overdo it, but never treating her as fragile. Margaret fussed and clucked and knitted tiny clothes, and the ranch hands became ridiculously careful around Sophia, as if she might break. In September, almost exactly a year after Owen had first told her he loved her, Sophia went into labor. It was long and difficult, and there were moments when she was frightened, but Owen stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, encouraging her, loving her through every contraction. Their son was born as the sun rose over the mountains, screaming lustily and perfect in every way. Owen held him with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face, and when he looked at Sophia, his expression held such love and gratitude she started crying too. "What should we name him?" Owen asked softly, settling the baby into Sophia's arms. She looked down at their son, his tiny face scrunched and red, and felt overwhelming love wash through her. "Samuel," she said quietly. "Samuel Watson, after the man whose death brought me here to you." Owen's eyes widened with emotion, understanding the gift she was giving, the acknowledgement that even loss could lead to something beautiful. "Samuel Watson," he repeated. "It is perfect." The years that followed were filled with joy and hard work in equal measure. Little Samuel grew into a sturdy, bright boy with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determination. 2 years later, a daughter joined the family, Emma, with curls the color of honey and a laugh that could light up a room. And 3 years after that, another son, James, who was quieter than his siblings but equally beloved. The ranch prospered under Owen and Sophia's joint management. Her bookkeeping skills and his ranching knowledge made them an effective team, and they gradually expanded their operation, buying adjacent land and increasing their herds. The small school Sophia started grew, serving children from families scattered throughout the mountains, and she found deep satisfaction in teaching. Owen's love never wavered, never diminished. He told her every day how much he loved her, showed her in countless small ways, in the coffee he brought her each morning, in the way he listened when she talked about her day, in how he partnered with her in every aspect of their life together. And she loved him with equal intensity, grateful every day for the chance that had brought her to Truckee, to that rough cabin to him. On their 10th anniversary, they stood together on the porch of the ranch house, watching their children play in the yard. Samuel, now 9, was showing his younger siblings how to properly rope a fence post. Emma was laughing at his serious instruction, and James was trying valiantly to copy his older brother's movements. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Sophia asked, leaning into Owen's warmth. "If Samuel Pierce had not died, if you had not been kind enough to help me that first day." Owen wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her close. "I try not to think about it because it terrifies me. The idea of a world where I never met you, never fell in love with you, it is not a world I want to imagine. I came here expecting one life and found something so much better," Sophia said softly. "I came to claim a dead man's land and found a home, a family, a love I never dreamed was possible." "You found exactly what you were supposed to find." Owen turned her in his arms, looking down at her with those blue eyes that still made her heart skip after all these years. "You found me, and I found you, and everything else just fell into place." He kissed her then, sweet and deep. And in the distance, their children's laughter rang out across the ranch. Sophia kissed him back, thinking of that frightened woman who had arrived in Truckee 10 years ago, widow to a man she had never met, and feeling grateful beyond words for every twist of fate that had led her to this moment. The wild country of the Sierra Nevada stretched around them, beautiful and harsh, the same mountains that had witnessed her arrival and her transformation. The land that had once seemed so daunting now felt like home, rich with memories and promise. And the man who held her, the neighboring cowboy who had helped her find her way when she was lost, was now and forever would be the greatest love of her life. As the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, the Watson family gathered on the porch. Owen pulled Sophia into his lap in the big rocking chair he had built, and their children settled around them, Samuel leaning against his father's leg, Emma curled against her mother's side, and little James sprawled across both their laps. "Tell us the story," Emma requested, as she did most evenings, "about how Mama came to find Papa." Sophia and Owen exchanged glances, sharing a smile full of private understanding and enduring love. Then Sophia began the tale, as she had told it many times before, of a woman who traveled west to marry a stranger and ended up finding true love with the helpful rancher next door. The children listened with rapt attention, though they had heard it all before, and Sophia felt Owen's hand tighten on her waist, felt his love in that simple touch. Outside, the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. Life in the mountains was never easy, the winters still brutal and the work never ending. There were years when the cattle prices dropped, when drought threatened their water supply, when illness swept through the area, and they lived in fear for their children. But through it all, Sophia and Owen faced everything together, their love the foundation that kept them strong. As the children grew older, they each found their own paths. Samuel developed his father's gift with horses, eventually taking over that aspect of the ranch operation. Emma inherited her mother's love of teaching, becoming a schoolteacher in Truckee and eventually opening her own school. James, the quiet one, surprised everyone by studying law and becoming an advocate for ranchers and homesteaders throughout the region. Owen and Sophia grew old together, their hair turning gray, their hands weathered by decades of work. But Owen still brought her coffee every morning, still told her he loved her every day. And Sophia still felt her heart skip when he smiled at her, still thanked whatever providence had brought her to that rough cabin in the mountains so many years before. The ranch became one of the most successful in the region, but more than that, it became a gathering place for the community. Sophia and Owen were known for their hospitality, for the way they helped neighbors in need, for how they had built something lasting not just for themselves, but for their children and grandchildren to come. In the spring of 1906, Owen and Sophia sat together on their porch, celebrating 30 years of marriage. Their children and grandchildren filled the house, and the sound of laughter and conversation drifted through the open windows. They held hands, these two people who had found each other against all odds, and looked out at the land they had built together. "No regrets?" Owen asked, his voice still strong despite the years. "Not a single one," Sophia answered truthfully. "Every day with you has been a gift." "Even the hard days, especially the hard days," she said firmly, "because we faced them together, and that made all the difference." Owen lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles as he had that first evening when he told her he loved her. "To 30 more years." Sophia laughed, but her eyes were bright with love. To 30 more years. They did not get quite that long, as age eventually caught up with them as it does everyone. But they got 20 more good years. Years filled with continued love and growing families. Years of watching their legacy spread through their children and grandchildren. Years of quiet satisfaction in knowing they had built something beautiful together. When Owen passed away in 1924, at the age of 76, he died peacefully in his sleep with Sophia at his side. She held his hand as she had held it thousands of times before, and whispered that she loved him, that he had made her life extraordinary, that she would carry him in her heart until they met again. Sophia lived 2 more years, surrounded by her loving family, still sharp and engaged despite her age. She spent her final days telling stories to her great-grandchildren, passing on the history of the ranch and the love story that had started it all. And when she died in the spring of 1926, her family buried her next to Owen on a hillside overlooking the ranch, where they could rest together forever in the land they had loved. On her gravestone, her children inscribed words that captured the essence of her journey. She came seeking land and found love. She came as a stranger and became home. The ranch continued for generations, the Watson name becoming synonymous with integrity and hard work throughout the region. And while the details of that first meeting, of the widow who arrived to claim a dead husband's land and the cowboy who helped her find her way, eventually faded into family legend, the love that had built it all remained, a foundation as solid as the mountains themselves. In Truckee, California, in the wild, beautiful country of the Sierra Nevada, a love story had unfolded that proved that sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as loss, and that home is not a place but a person, someone who sees you at your lowest and helps you rise, someone who loves you through every season, someone who chooses you every single day. Sophia Pierce, who became Sophia Watson, had arrived in the West with nothing but grief and determination. She left behind a legacy of love, family, and proof that courage and hope could transform even the most unlikely beginning into a beautiful ending. Her story and Owen's became part of the land itself, as enduring as the mountains and as constant as the stars that shone over the ranch they built together, the home they created, the love that sustained them through 50 years of marriage and beyond. And so the story that began with death and loss ended with life and love, with generations carrying forward the values and devotion of the couple who had started it all, with the knowledge that true love, when found, is worth any risk, any hardship, any challenge. Sophia and Owen had proven that, had lived it every day of their lives together, and their legacy was not just the land or the ranch or the family name, but the example of what love could build when given the chance to grow.